Hello, everybody. Welcome to the webinar. We're going to get started in just a few moments here as everyone joins us. While we're waiting, please feel free to drop a line in the chat box, introduce yourself, maybe let us know where you're joining us from. Also, let us know if you are a high school student or a college student. If you have any questions, feel free to get those ready to go. We'll get started in just a minute here.
Hey, Dad. I invited my dad to come today. They can see
That's
me.
amazing. That's awesome. Yeah, feel free if you're joining us to say hello. We love to interact with our audience members, and hopefully we get to answer any questions you may have. We're getting some people joining us from California. Hello to you. Awesome. From Maryland. Hello. Three of us here on the panel today are students currently at University of Maryland, so it's nice to see some fellow Marylanders here. It's great to have you. All right, great. So maybe let's give this just a few more seconds here, and then we'll go ahead and get started. So please, like I've said before, feel free to type out any questions you may have in the chat box. We'll do what we can to answer them as we go, but at the end we'll have about 15 minutes left over for questions and comments or any other discussion you guys might want to have. With that being said, I think we can go ahead and get started. So today's webinar is on why representation matters and the first generation experiences of students in the sciences. So this is a very important topic to have and a wonderful group of people putting it together. So this webinar is brought to you by the TGR Foundation, as well as the Society for the Advancement of Chicanos and Hispanics at the University of Maryland. And we're really happy to have you guys here. And we have put together a panel of amazing scientists from diverse backgrounds. And we think that by getting a chance to pick their brains a little bit, maybe we can all learn something and really help each other progress and succeed in some of these roles. And so I think with that being said, we can get started. This panel session will be recorded. So if you miss something, don't worry about it too much. Just know that we can go back. And before I go ahead and introduce our panelists, I just want to go over some digital community guidelines. So this is just to set the stage and expectations for how we'll interact with each other. So once again, the Q&A box is there for you guys to fill up with questions. Anything you might have, we're excited to hear about it and we'll try to answer it. The chat box, on the other hand, is any comments or thoughts. We'd love to hear feedback. Maybe it's not a question. Maybe you just want to give us some kudos for something that one of the panelists has said, or something you agree with. And with that being said, we encourage you to interact with us, but we request that you please maintain a respectful and collaborative environment. We would like to work together to bring progress and positivity to all of us, and so we would appreciate your help with that. And so, yeah, with that being said, I can go ahead and introduce myself. So I'm our moderator for today's session. My name is Edgar Perez. I am originally from Southern California, and I'm actually a Earl Woods Scholar alum at the TGR Foundation. And I've been involved with the TGR Foundation in one way or another for well over 10 years. And now I am a third-year PhD student studying physics at the Joint Quantum Institute at the University of Maryland. And it has been a marvelous, exciting roller coaster of a ride to get here. And I think that I'm very thankful for all the opportunities I've had. And There's so much that I've learned throughout the way that I'm excited to be able to facilitate a discussion with some of my peers who I think also have a lot of things to offer to the rest of our community. So with that being said, I'll jump over to our panelists. So we have, like I said before, we have 3 members of the UMD community joining us today. So, or excuse me, Montserrat is not from UMD, but she is joining us today as well. She is also a Earl Woods alum. And I'll let her introduce herself further, but Montserrat, will you take it away?
Yeah, so hi everyone, I am Montserrat Orozco. I recently graduated from California State University, Los Angeles with a bachelor's degree in biochemistry with a minor in criminal justice last year in spring 2020. I am currently doing a post-baccalaureate program funded by the NIH at Indiana University, Purdue University in Indianapolis. So right now I'm just currently doing research. My research project focuses on like the early life lead exposure and the correlation with development of substance use disorders in mouse models. So this coming fall, 2021, I will be enrolling into a PhD program.
That's amazing. Thank you, Monse. We really look forward to hearing what you have to say about, the application process and, your post-bac as well. Up next, we have Chelsea Lamar from University of Maryland.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Chelsea Lamar. I'm a STEM enthusiast and diversity and inclusion activist. I'm really passionate not only about research that directly benefits our society, but also educating people about that research. I'm originally from Atlanta, Georgia, and I went to undergrad at Howard University in Washington, D.C., and now I'm pursuing a doctoral degree in chemistry at the University of Maryland College Park. I'm involved in 2 organizations. One of my goals is to improve the experience of underrepresented minorities in STEM. So I currently also work with the Center for Minorities in Science and Engineering. I serve as the program coordinator for their undergraduate research program. I also am a part of the Racial Diversity and Inclusion Steering Committee, which was formed as a result of the recent social justice movement sparked by the deaths of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd. So we're a group of students, faculty, staff, undergrad and graduate. And so we're working on maintaining an environment where everyone, regardless of race, ethnicity, sex, gender, sexual orientation, that we all have equal rights and opportunities to thrive in our department, in our community. So I'm really excited to be here with you all today.
Thank you so much, Chelsea, both for all the work you do for our communities and as well for joining us here today and sharing with us, the things you've seen and what you've taken away from them. So yeah, thanks. Finally, we have Efrain Rodriguez, who is a professor at the University of Maryland and director for the graduate program in the Department of Chemistry.
Hello, everyone. Good evening on the East Coast. I guess good afternoon on the West. Yeah, so I've been in Maryland since 2009. I was at the National Institute of Standards and Technology. Some of you may be familiar with NIST out in Gaithersburg, Maryland. And then after that, I joined the faculty here in 2012, where I've been teaching and doing research. And for the past 3 years, I've been the director of the graduate program in chemistry. As far as context on, the theme of tonight, which is first generation. My parents are from Mexico, immigrated here when they were in their 20s. In Texas is where I was born and raised there. So I'm originally from West Texas. Now I find myself here in Maryland.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Efrain. We look forward to hearing all about what you have to say and more about your background as well. So with introductions complete here, I'm going to stop sharing screen now and we will jump right into our Q&A session. Once again, if you audience members have any questions you would like to have answered by our panelists, feel free to drop those in the Q&A or give some kudos in the chat. So the first question will actually be going here to Montse. So in your experience, do you think that your academic and or professional trajectory in science has been influenced by being first generation or a person of color?
I do think it has influenced it just because like as a first generation student, you learn through trial and error, and just learning how to network and knowing who to go to for help or for resources. I know from like my experience in high school, like applying to just college was something new to me. I knew I wanted to go to college, and I knew I wanted to pursue science because at that point I wanted to do forensic science because I was just so amazed to seeing how science helped like cases and how to solve them. But I know like how I just mentioned, like through like trial and error, I found out that that wasn't for me. That's because I got into a research lab at my current or my undergrad institution, and I did plant science. However, like I did a lot of volunteer programs where I mentored underrepresented communities, and I stumbled upon a program that I volunteered for over probably like 3 years, which is called the Prison Education Project, where I worked with incarcerated individuals and I heard stories about their drug addiction and their stories. So that kind of resonated a lot with what I saw growing up in my communities as well. But I still had that interest of still finding out and being curious about the science behind it. I was part of LSAM, which is a Louis Stokes Alliance for Minority Participation that helps undergraduates, first generation and underrepresented students find resources to do summer research programs. And they sent me an email where I found out about my summer research experience that I did at the University of Southern California, where I got the opportunity to do neuroscience research, and that actually solidified my my transition from plant science to neuroscience. So that was just like the first step, like finding the right resources to see if research was for me. And actually, when I was at USC, I didn't know at that point that there are actually summer programs for high school students who are very interested in doing science. So I thought that was like something great because as a first generation student, like I didn't know that actually existed. So that was actually like fantastic to find out. And applying to graduate school was another step because I didn't know how to apply and how to go about it. So when I know Edgar mentioned the Society for Chicano SACNAS, I was actually part of SACNAS in my undergrad, and I had the opportunity to present my research in 2019, and that's where I found out about my post-baccalaureate program. What it is, it gives you the opportunity to do research, but also the program guides you to apply to graduate school. So that's what I was doing last semester. So I feel like in a nutshell, it has guided me, or it has like affected it, but I feel like I have learned a lot as a person through that trial and error, and has made me like resilient, and also like help others if they're in the same process and share that like experience with them.
Absolutely, I love that. I think you make a really good point about resilience here. You mentioned that through trial and error is the method that we use a lot of times to figure out what we're doing and how we want to proceed in the future. And I think that does take time to test things out and learn whether they work. But like you just said, a lot of times that also builds our resilience. And this is something that I think we do learn from our communities, and the nurturing that it provides for us. And I also did my undergraduate and then did a post-baccalaureate program, did some trial and error. I applied to graduate school 2 separate times, and after all this trial and error, I did eventually land in a place where I'm really, really happy. I think I'm doing great work and with great people. And so what you said really resonated with my own experiences, and I hope with some of those of the audience members as well. Thanks for sharing. All right, so the next question is going out to Efrain. So what is something about you or your experience that you wish your peers that are not first generation students or students of color knew?
Yeah, so this one I have to reach back quite a bit because it's been a while since I was a student. But thinking on it, I was thinking on it this afternoon, and I think, when there's a special circumstance that comes about when you're a first generation student. You're sort of in this between two worlds, I would say, mode, right? You're sort of really sort of on this trajectory, and it sometimes can be a little bit intimidating. And what I mean by that is, you know, for example, my background, my parents are blue collar workers. You know, it wasn't like in high school I could say, Mom, Dad, how do I write my college essay? You know, and et cetera, right? And so it doesn't have to necessarily be connected to just immigrant status or anything like that. It can also be socioeconomic. And you know, as you go into that new world, which is the academic world, I would say, right? And going to college, and specifically here we're talking about going into the sciences. And so it can be a little bit, how should I put it? You sometimes are a little bit lost and it's hard to navigate that new world. And you don't really have that network, and Monse was talking about networks in place necessarily. And so I would have liked it, I guess, if my peers recognize that a bit more, and sort of helped out with learning how to uh, cultivate mentors, how to find those resources, etc. And so I think, you know, nowadays I feel like there's a lot more of that. You know, Chelsea, um, for example, works in a center that helps students with navigating that new world. And so I think that for me was the biggest challenge. And eventually, you know, now I'm in my mid-career, so I've, you know, found my groove, my, you know, where I'm comfortable and happy. But I think in the beginning, when you're, you know, in your 20s, in your early 20s, it's difficult, and it requires some help to navigate that new environment.
Yeah, those are really, really good points. I think that I can identify with this feeling of having two different identities that you brought up kind of at the beginning. We're stuck between two worlds, where I've chosen for myself a career that is excellent on like in academia, and on paper it looks fantastic, but at the same time, my decision to pursue this has in some ways made my life a little less relatable to my family, say. But at the same time, I'm going after this, you know, like glorified position and, you know, in school or whatever. So I think that this is something I wish also some of my peers recognize, that, you know, so the sacrifices we make can be different and they change, you know, on a per person basis. And
Yeah, for people to understand what those sacrifices are, because actually they're pretty deep and they're very deeply personal sometimes, those sacrifices. It can be something as much as losing your accent, right? And there's some loss there, and you sort of grieve it, and sometimes people don't recognize that.
Chelsea and Monse, feel free to jump in at any point. But for me, something that really helped with some of these challenges was finding ways to give back to my community, or cultivate a sense of community at the places I was. So, for example, here at University of Maryland, I've been working with the Society for Chicanos and Native Americans in Science to try to, you know, bring us together. And even though we're spread out throughout campus, to have this like unified sense of identity within the institution. Have you guys had any other have you guys had any? Have you guys done anything that has helped you in a similar way?
Oh yeah, definitely. Like you said, building your community. So I mentioned that I work with the Center for Minorities in Science and Engineering. That's a community for me. Even within my department, being a part of an organization helps me build community, because you're able to talk to people that's not always, you know, academic related, because a lot of things come with being in academia that you can't always speak to in a professional setting. So you need that community to talk to about those personal things, or just things that you might encounter in the academic setting. And so definitely having, you know, people that have gone through maybe similar experiences, or even if they've gone through different experiences, just to hear that and have that cross-cultural communication, I think is really important.
Absolutely. I found that it re-energizes me to interact with others and give back. So yeah, thank you for sharing, Efrain. And actually, for the next question, I'm going to go right back to Chelsea and Efrain. Maybe I'll go Chelsea first, and then Efrain, you can jump in after. With all that being said, let's talk about why should our communities pursue careers in the sciences?
Right. I mean, I think it goes back to creating like local change in your personal community. So I think it's really important, even if you are first gen and your family members or your friends haven't seen that, just to show that you're representing something different is really important, because they might not even know that that exists. Especially being a person of color, being a Black female, I didn't even see that until I got to high school. And I didn't know that Black scientists really existed like that. You can read about that stuff, you might read about that, take a history class, but it doesn't really resonate until you see it with your own eyes sometimes. So definitely having that sense of representation is really important. And then for us to go back and relay that information and even provide that information to maybe help someone else take a similar path, if not the same path, I think is really important. So you might not, be able to change the world, but you could change a corner of it, at least.
Right, absolutely. I love that. I think that's a really good point. I think one thing I remind communities of color often is that at the moment we make up approximately 30% of the college-age population, but what percentage of professors are people of color? It changes per field, but it's in a much smaller number. For example, I think in my field of physics, we're at something like 5%. So to think that we are 6 times underrepresented in my field is something that motivates me to give back. And it does motivate me to pursue my science and do it well, so that other people, can kind of see that and hopefully be inspired themselves. Of course, there's other reasons to pursue science that I would love to talk about more, but I'll yield back so we can hear Efrain and his thoughts on this.
Yeah, why pursue the sciences? I think there are many reasons why you want to. For me personally, I liked a couple of things about it. I felt like the sciences were more democratic in the sense that anybody can come in, right? It's not about how rich you are or whatever, right? You can come in if you're interested, if you want to solve big problems, if you want to have big ideas, if you want to go deeply into a problem, if you're very curious, people are going to be welcoming. And I have to say that over my scientific career, I had mentors from all over the world. And I don't know why, but I really enjoyed that. I felt like perhaps they didn't come in with any preconceptions of me or my background or anything like that. So my PhD advisor was British. My postdoc advisor was as well. And then I had advisors from Spain, from India, from Germany. And then over time, you build up, we call it an academic family. And when you go to conferences and meetings, you see your family there. Your extended family, and it's an international family, and I really like that. For me, to see different cultures and to step out a little bit out of myself, and so there's this personal part about it that I really enjoy. And if you like to travel, sciences are also great for that. The first time I did international travel outside of going to Mexico, because I used to go every Christmas and summer to see my family. But outside of that, when I was in graduate school, the first time I got to go to China, and even South Africa, I got to go to when I was a graduate student, which was, really eye-opening for me doing all this travel. So I don't know, I think it opens your world, opens your mind. It's just a great place to be in.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree entirely. I think that there are some ways in which science kind of peels away or separates some of the issues that we face on a day-to-day with global issues that are, you know, puzzled upon by minds across the world. And in some ways, it can really help break down barriers. I think one big way that we see this is through giant international collaborations on things like black hole mergers or LIGO that would be absolutely impossible for any individual nation to try to take on themselves. And yeah, it's a great way to meet more people. So Montse, I would also be interested, I'm going to ask you the next question too, but if you have something on this, I'd love to hear it. But to give you a little bit of time to think about, again, why our community should pursue careers in the sciences. While you think about that, I'll provide a little bit more of more context, a very practical reason on why we should pursue careers in the sciences. In my eyes, I think that one thing that the sciences give you is quantitative skills that are extremely flexible. They teach you how to think very critically about the issues at hand. And frankly, they also teach you how to take criticism in a way, because sometimes, you know, we might have been working on a project for a very long time and be very emotionally invested, but ultimately the data speaks for itself. And, you know, if we're wrong, we're wrong. And it's something we have to learn from. And I think, you know, things like this are some of the golden nuggets inside of STEM that that really helped me grow as a person in those ways. And, you know, also financially, I think that there are a lot of opportunities if you do decide to pursue a career in STEM, be it up until the undergraduate level, master's level, or PhD level. There's many different jobs you can take on once you get a career in STEM. And many times it's not even necessarily in the field that you chose to pursue. Yeah.
Yeah, so all three of you like touch points on why we should, or why like we all should pursue like science. But I know definitely for me, it's more about one, like attending the conferences and learning more. It's a lifelong learning journey. And that's like something that it's just amazing. Like you go to conferences, you have this opportunity to go to conferences, and you don't just learn about like the type of research you do or something that's related to your project, but you get to like learn about what other scientists are doing around the world or around like the United States. So that's just very like eye-opening, and it's very amazing.
Absolutely. Okay, great. And so I think I'll take the next question is going to be right back to you, Monse, and then afterwards we'll jump to Chelsea. So how do you think representation in your experience has affected you? Are there any mentors that stand out to you, or how do you think your identity influences your ability to mentor others?
Yeah, so my first mentor or research mentor was a woman. So I think that was something that was very valuable as an undergrad, seeing a woman in STEM and her helping me know what research was all about and how to approach like an experiment or a hypothesis, how to generate like ideas. And then my second research mentor was also a woman in science. So I feel like that representation of women and first generation scientists, that's something that resonated with me because they come from a similar background that I did. So I identified that with them. And even now, like in my postbac program, I'm still finding like new mentors, whether that's like mental health awareness, financial, and just things like that, because I feel like having like different types of mentors is important, because not one mentor will have everything that you need. So that's what I've been learning, and that's still like on a learning curve. But as of like mentoring, I've had limited experiences on mentoring. I have like mentored like high school students when it comes to like SAT, ACT prep, and working with incarcerated juveniles as well. But the piece of advice that I always give them is always be present, show up, because even if you show up, it shows that you're trying, and just show up and ask questions. And I know like Chelsea mentioned, like, you know, even if they want to follow your path or just helping them go to where they want, it's something that's very encouraging. So that's what I usually try to implement when I mentor, and also like see where they're coming from, because I know like we all come from different backgrounds, and just being like empathetic and knowing where they come from helps them out as well. And just being there and being supportive really helps out someone.
Once you sound like you would be a great mentor. Really meeting people halfway, I think, is a huge help when you're trying to help someone and receive help from someone. So
Thank you.
I think that's awesome. And Chelsea, we can if you have time, you can answer, or we can circle back. But the question is the same: how do you think representation has affected you? And if there's a mentor that stands out.
Sorry, he's coughing. But yeah, I think Monse said it really well, like having kind of like a board of advisors, because not all one mentor has all the questions. There's a really good book that I read recently. It's by Stacey Abrams. You okay? What's up? Okay. It's by Stacey Abrams, and it's called Lead from the Outside: How to Build Your Future and Make Real Change. And so she asked some critical questions of like evaluating the people that you have around you, because sometimes you don't realize that you actually have a mentor or they're actually providing some type of support for you. And then once you identify the things that you may be missing, is to seek out those. Are you okay? I'm sorry, 1 second.
No problem.
Yeah, let me go.
Yeah, we'll circle back to you. In the meantime, Efrain, if you have anything to chime in on, if you have anything to add to this, we'd love to hear it.
On the question on mentors.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is a really important point, because you do want to seek mentors that have, as Chelsea said, a variety of different answers or different experiences. For example, you want mentors that also will help you do things like look at your resume, read your essays, those kind of more practical things, right? Where they can give you very honest feedback. This is really what you need, is honest feedback. And then there are, in my life, I had, as I alluded to earlier, I had mentors from very different backgrounds, different nationalities. And that certainly somewhat influenced my relationship with them, because sometimes, say if they're American, they may have a better understanding of my background, whereas they're international, they may not. But to this day, I still I'm still in contact with some of my mentors from graduate school. I still send them a proposal idea, what do you think? Is it great, or do I need to start over? And so you do want to be choosy in this respect, because you want someone that you're really comfortable with, that you can vent to. Sometimes, from time to time, you'll have disappointments, you'll have some failures, let me just say so, right? It's part of the process, it's part of the scientific process, is to have failures, to have your hypotheses actually proved otherwise. And that's okay, but you're supposed to learn something from that, right? And I would say that many times when you do feel disappointed because of this, whether it's a rejection of some kind, and even at my stage, there's still rejections I worry about, like my grant proposal, will it be rejected or not, right? So it's not just the college application, but it goes on. And occasionally you do have these setbacks, and you need to have people that you can talk to about that, and realign your perspective to see the bigger picture, so that you can keep moving forward.
Yeah, I think that those are really good points, and I think everyone has said this at this point, but having different types of mentors. And to add to that a little bit, I think it's also important for us to remember that mentors don't necessarily have to be older than us, or much older than us. I think that sometimes I have found people who I've admired and just kind of decided to reach out and pursue some sort of like tutoring from them or mentorship. So one example is when I was a junior in college, I was preparing to to write a thesis my senior year in college. And so there was a physics student whose thesis I thought was very, very interesting. And usually your thesis is your own project, but I was like, it's not going to hurt them if I just join them in the lab and just look over their shoulder for a little while and get an idea of what they're doing. And so I did. I reached out and they were happy to have me there and explain to me what they were doing and what their days looked like. And I found that to be really helpful. And this is something that I've done from time to time. I once reached out to someone in my network who worked at NASA, and they let me shadow them for like a week. And that was amazing opportunity that I got by asking and showing up, which I think Monza was bringing up. And I think the other thing about mentorship that I want to add that I have found really valuable is that for those mentors of ours that are older, somehow in a better position than us, it's very valuable for them to know what our goals are. So in college, my academic advisors, I would tell them, hey, I'm looking for an internship that I can do this summer. And then because people in higher positions sometimes hear about these things, and if they know you're looking for one, then when they hear about the position, they'll kind of connect the dots on their own. And if I hadn't reached out to some of the professors I knew and told them this, maybe they wouldn't have connected those dots. But I think it's really important to let people know what it is you're trying to do. And most times people are happy to help. So yeah, I think that mentorship is extremely valuable, and yeah, I couldn't reemphasize more all the things you guys have said. So there are many educators in the audience, and I think that we can try to get to some of the questions. But first, there's one here that has been asked that I think is excellent. So I just want to, anyone who would like to chime in, I would love to hear. Are there any people on the panel who found the love for their field through an informal education setting?
I think I would say I found it through an informal way, but I didn't realize I found it. So ever since I was little, and my dad can attest to this because he's actually here, but I was always like mixing stuff. Like I always had the science kit, or like I was always doing something related to chemistry or science. And so growing up, I didn't really realize that I was really passionate about it. It was just always there for me. And so it wasn't until I got to high school that I saw my AP chemistry professor. And that's when I realized, okay, like I really love chemistry. I'm going to pursue this as my major in undergrad. And so that's exactly what I did. But I definitely think that it was always present. I just may have not been self-aware that I was really passionate about it.
Yeah, I think this is true in many cases. I think we develop some of these interests, maybe without completely realizing it. Efrain or Monza, do you guys have anything to
add? I guess like I can add a little bit. I know like in my intro, like I mentioned how I switched fields because of my volunteer experience. So I would consider that informal, I would say. So because of that experience, it made me more, I would say like more curious about, I guess like in neuroscience specifically, and how the brain works and how I could like implement biochemistry, because that's what I got my BS in, and how to implement it into like the brain and how like it works. But also I have a minor in criminal justice. That's something like I've always been passionate about. So I know like within the science, I can pursue like science policy and still have that criminal justice background into it. So I would say like that's a sort of informal way.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that those are really, really good points. I want to ask Efrain if he has anything to add, and then I think we can move on to the next question.
I'm not sure if this qualifies as informal, but I also had a post-baccalaureate internship for a year at Los Alamos National Labs in New Mexico. And, I wanted to pursue science, but it was that internship that set me on the path to the particular field that I'm in to this day. That I did that internship in 2003. So, so I've been in it for a while now. in this particular field. And so, yeah, that was pretty decisive for me.
Yeah, wow. Okay, so that makes 3 of us then who have had post-baccalaureate opportunities in some shape or form. So for any audience members that don't know, a post-bac or post-baccalaureate, some research or fellowship, the ending there might change from place to place, is basically a position that is given to someone who has a bachelor's with the idea that the position is more or less temporary. It's more or less a stepping stone for them to get either experiences or time to align their interests or academics ambitions with the correct trajectory for their future. So I also had one. I had one at the National Institute for Standards and Technology in Boulder, Colorado, and it was immensely helpful. Like in Efrain's case, it helped me figure out what specific field I wanted to get into, and as I understand it, Monse also benefited a lot from her post-bac. So for any students out there, do look out for these opportunities. They're not, I think they're not as well advertised as maybe they should be, but, I found mine through my network, but I know some of them are also posted on Google, and in physics in particular, there's several. Yeah. So to get back to our educators here a little bit, I think some of them are really interested in hearing both at the high school level and college level, what sorts of things can administrators or educators do to really inspire students? And yeah, and specific, like if there's anything, if there's anything targeted that they can really do to help first-gen students or students of color. And I think, sorry to do this unannounced, or unprepared, but Efrain, I think maybe you have a good perspective on this with your experience here.
Could you repeat the question? Sorry. Okay.
Yeah, sure. So is there anything that either in high school or college that you think helped with your career? And more generally, how do science administrators or science educators help the students really consider these careers themselves? Yeah.
Right. I can speak about first generation, I would, a little bit. I would say, looking back on it, I think one thing we should be aware of is that sometimes there may be some cultural differences that make first generation students a little quieter, a little shyer, not as willing to speak up. It doesn't mean they're not interested. They really are, and they really want to get into the sciences, but there may be a language barrier there. There may be, again, like a cultural one where it's not polite to speak up, unprompted, etc. And also there may be like a slight confidence gap as well. You may have some brilliant, smart, great students, but they have that confidence gap and they're not as willing to tell you, I really want to be a scientist. I know I wouldn't have said that even in high school, because I would have thought, well, who am I to think I can be a scientist at that time? And that's the honest truth, is, there was this huge confidence gap. And it would have been because I didn't see people like myself go out and become scientists. And so just be aware of that and try to bring them in, try to, really find out what their interests are, what sort of projects or problems they want to solve. I think, now I'm all the way now here on the end of looking at like graduate admissions applications and stuff like that. And, when I read like a personal statement from a candidate or an applicant, I want to know, like, what kind of problems really interest them? What is it that they're really curious about? And why did they become curious about something like that? And so help them articulate that out loud and also on paper. And so that would be my advice to them.
Yeah, I think these are really good points. I think that articulating our ambitions can be challenging sometimes. I think that school teaches us how to be very technical. We can, solve math problems and, balance equations. I think being able to reach into ourselves and figure out why exactly we're enjoying this, and, because it's something that sometimes is foreign to us. We're not really exposed to it sometimes, and we're not totally sure why we enjoy it, but we sure as hell know we do. Monse or Chelsea, do you guys have anything to add?
Yeah, I would just like to add, because Efrain, you said some really good points, but also like preparation of those soft skills, like he was mentioning, like how to articulate that information, how to communicate, what a presentation. I know coming in, I had to give a presentation for a fellowship that I was trying to receive in grad school. And so that was really my first time presenting my research to a panel of scientists. And so just having opportunities like that where students can practice that. Also, things as simple as like how to communicate via email to a potential educator or advisor. You'd be surprised that that's just not a normal skill that you develop coming out of high school or even in high school. So I work with the undergraduate research program, and I have a template for how to seek out a research advisor. These are the questions that you should be asking them. This is how you can approach them. I even give them a template for this is how you can have your opening conversation and things like that. And that stuff goes a really long way because like Edgar and Efrain were mentioning, we're not as confident sometimes. So sometimes we are so hesitant to approach someone, it can read off the wrong way when we're communicating to people. So just developing those other skills that are not just technical.
Absolutely. The soft skills go a long way for sure. I have some stuff to add, but Montserrat, do you have anything you would like to say?
No, I think if Ryan and Chelsea like covered it, soft skills is like something that we all like since high school should know. I know for me, it's like looking back to high school, it's like I wouldn't even know what to put on an email or how to even approach someone in that aspect, or just like I know I'm good at explaining it verbally, but when it comes to like paper, it's really hard, or it was really hard to do it. And it's just like a learning process that's still ongoing. And that's like a really good skill to have.
Awesome. I think that, so I do have some tips for administrators, but these are completely, each one of these can probably be discussions on their own, but I would just like to spill them out. And if, this generates more questions, feel free to drop them in the Q&A box. So I think what's important, maybe this is more so, this will be implemented differently in college and in high school, but I think giving space to the students for students to be able to work with one another is really important. So as we've all said, we have in some way, shape, or form connected to people who are like us in one way or another. That might be because scientifically we think the same way, or that might be because we have the same cultural backgrounds. In college, I found it extremely helpful to have a space and a group of people who I could be vulnerable in front of and really say, when I am not understanding any single part of this problem, can you guys please help me? Because that can be challenging to do with people who you don't feel comfortable around. I also think that sometimes students don't take help that they need, and not because they don't want to, but because they genuinely believe that they don't need the help. I think if help exists, encouraging them to take it, and if help doesn't exist, generating it. I also think that sometimes students of color or people of color are asked to do work that to help other students of color, and a lot of times we do this out of a lot of passion and love for our communities. But I also think that it takes a toll, and so being able to compensate them in some way or with some sort of recognition would really motivate us to continue doing so, and would help us flourish, not just as individuals, but as communities as a whole. And I think these three things can be manifested differently in high school and college, but for administrators, that's what I would say. And
good point, Edgar. Accolades go a long way. It really does go a long way.
It does. I would like to just reiterate that, and the student putting it on the resume or on the CV, it really helps them. And so that kind of recognition is not just to boost morale, but also to boost prospects and job. Yeah.
all right, thank you guys. So we have a question from the audience. So we have Nani here asking, what is one thing you wish you had known as an underrepresented student that would have better prepared you for your career? And anyone feel free to jump in.
So this is going to be a really science answer, but how to actually read a research paper, like a scientific journal article. If someone could have laid that out for me before I got to grad school, I would have been light years ahead of the curve. But just having that skill is actually really useful.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to piggyback off that, also writing an academic paper is super challenging. Making figures takes a really long time, and knowing Photoshop has helped tremendously. But I would say also I would say that just do what you love, and then you'll kind of figure it out from there. I wish I would have done more specifically I wish I would have done more engineering when I was younger. That would have really helped me. Just on my own. Yeah. Monse, I think you had something.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, the question was, what advice would we give our, I guess, like younger self? That was the question? Okay.
Yeah, more or less, that would have helped you now.
Okay. I would say not be so hard on myself, because I would be so hard on myself, like whether it was like the grades or if I didn't accomplish something, or and I would beat myself literally up. Well, not literally, but like I would beat myself up for it, because I was like, you know what, if I didn't get this, it means this. When in reality, it's like we should see it as like, I didn't get this, but how do I go around it and improve in this way? So if I didn't get like a summer research, I didn't get into like a summer research program, like I would sit back and say like, hey, like, what did I do? How could I improve this? Like, was it my resume? Was it something that I said in my cover letter, or is it something that I'm missing? And what can I do to improve my that, instead of just like beating myself for it?
Absolutely. I think being kind to ourselves is very important, and forgiving ourselves and helping us, being supportive for ourselves is huge.
Yeah, well, I also want to add, like, also like celebrate like any little accomplishment that you have, just because like that's like something that keeps you going, because sometimes like it can be like really rough. So it's like, whether you get an A on the exam, or you get like a fellowship or just a scholarship, like having those little proud moments really does go a long way, because it just shows like, what, I have accomplished so much. And sometimes like you think you haven't even done like enough.
That's a really good point, because I struggled with that a lot, trying to recognize that, oh, this is actually an accomplishment, and not letting like my identity like limit myself in that thinking, because oftentimes you'll think, oh, well, a white person, maybe this is normal for them. And so I shouldn't think of it as an accomplishment because this is normal. Like, this is just the standard. I need to get here. But really you've made it really far. Just know that like everything you're doing is an accomplishment, and it's your story.
Yeah, you guys are absolutely right. I think, comparing my successes to the successes of others has, made it harder for me to celebrate things when I should just be happy about all that I've accomplished in my own like trajectory or so. So I have a question here for Efrain, which was what was the experience of finding a job, or in your case, a faculty position, after going through your studies?
The faculty position, or just after undergrad?
Feel free to answer either or both.
Okay, because they're pretty different worlds. And I'll just go briefly through them. The first one is, is the job after bachelor's degree, and I had a choice in that respect. To go to industry or to take this post back, and it was just personal circumstances, to be honest, that took me away from the job in industry. And I just felt also more comfortable living in New Mexico, where the job was in my post back. And it seemed more interesting to me, even though the pay was like a third of what industry was going to offer me. And looking back on it, I made the right decision, I think, for me personally. And so, but it was tough, and I think you know, applying for those jobs because you send out resume after resume and you just don't know where it goes. And you don't hear back from vast majority of places where you're applying a lot of times. And so it can be a little bit dispiriting, you know, to not hear back after trying for a while, but just keep going. It's just a normal process of hearing back after a while. And you know, then I did graduate school and postdoc, sort of the route, and then came faculty position. I'm not going to sugarcoat that part, which is that it is tough to get a faculty position in what we call R1 or Research 1 institution like University of Maryland, because there's just a lot of that's a real process where you have to think about like how much money you need to start up a research lab and how you know, it's I interviewed probably at I'm gonna say like 6, 7. It's now in the fog of memory, but research positions in different, from Oregon to here to in New England to California, and it was tough. It was a tough process because it's super competitive, and when you get turned down, it can be pretty stinging. But you know, I ended up here in College Park, which is a great place. I feel really lucky about that. But if you want to know more about that, I would maybe you can send me an email because it's a pretty lengthy process.
Right. Yeah, I imagine. But one thing I do take away from this, though, is that that there's with these STEM careers, there comes a lot of variety in your options. Both, you know, you can pursue faculty, you can pursue industry, you can work in California, you can work in New York. So in some ways, it's very challenging, but in another way, you're also given a lot of freedom granted to you by your education to choose what it is you want.
Sorry, I just wanted to say something, which is that, you know, I maybe painted a dire picture here on the, but there are a lot of different kinds of faculty positions. I was talking about a specific one. There's liberal arts college, there's primarily undergraduate institutions, PUIs they're called. There's a lot out there. It's just, you know, I was focused on one part, and so don't think that, you know, it's something that you shouldn't think about. Definitely think about it. Is, you know, it's just that one particular position I was talking about.
Thank you for sharing. Okay, and then so just to wrap up here, the last minute or two, Monsif, in like 60 seconds or so, you could describe the TGR Foundation and how it has impacted you and your trajectory, and then I'll follow up after you.
Yeah, so I've actually been part of the TGR Learning Lab or Foundation since I was in 5th grade. It was a field trip that we took in elementary where we went to go and do science. So I was actually exposed to science in the 5th grade because of the TGR Learning Lab. But also I received like mentorship through the College Bound Academy where they helped me apply for college right after high school. So I'm very grateful for that. I was also part-time. I was a volunteer there. So I was there for probably over, I would say like 5 years. I don't know, since like what, 10 years old. But overall, like the foundation is just amazing because they do really help out first generation students, and they provide them with the resources that students need to be successful even after graduating from college.
Absolutely, and I think I can reiterate a lot of what you've said. I've been with the TGR Foundation since the 7th grade, and so that's well over a decade now, I believe. And I've, at different stages in my life, the TGR Foundation has helped me in different ways, and I think it's just been one consistent thing. So in the 7th grade, when I was first starting out, I took like an engineering class where I first saw the first CNC machine I had ever seen, and very recently, like maybe like 3 years ago, I started using CNC machines in the lab to fabricate optical components. And when I saw it, I was like, wait a minute, like I've done something like this before. And it was, you know, way back when I was a child at the TGR Foundation. And, you know, when I was in undergrad, I was an Earl Wood Scholar. And through that program, I got an immense amount of support, both in the application process, as well as throughout college, building these soft skills that Chelsea was really bringing out. And I think that, even now as an alum of the Earl Woods Scholarship Program and like lifelong member of the TGR Foundation, it continues to help me by giving me the opportunity to give back to my community and, you know, helping us grow together. And yeah, I'm immensely helpful for the TGR Foundation, as well as for other communities like the LSAM community, which Monse and Chelsea are a part of, and SACNAS as well, which is a national organization as well as a local organization. So with that, I'd like to thank all the panelists for being here today and for sharing all of your amazing experiences with us. I am sure that the audience members were happy to hear about each and every one of yours experiences. And I think that with that, I would like to put up a couple resources here on the screen, just so that our audience members can check these things out after our webinar, which will once again be posted online. So the Society for the Advancement of Chicanos, Hispanics, and Native Americans is something that both Monse and I brought up, and it helps Chicanos and Native Americans. But there's also many societies that help people of other identities. For example, the National Society for Black Physicists helps Black physicists, and there are others as well. Sometimes searching for these resources can be very fruitful. And once again, as Monse and I have already said, the TGR Foundation is also an excellent resource for students at the high school and college level and even beyond. So we really encourage students, families, and educators to take a look at their resource at the TGR Foundation websites listed here below. And with all that being said, we'd like to thank the audience members for being here with us today and being a part of this very important conversation. We really like all the questions you guys asked, and yeah, thank you so much.